Baby heard a German Shepherd. Crying under a wooden bridge. What happened next? Touched millions. What happened next will shock you. The story you're about to listen to changed everything for one small boy and a desperate dog. If you're listening from around the world, drop a comment and let us know where you're from. Like, share, and subscribe for more heartwarming stories that will leave you speechless. 5-year-old Kai pressed his small face against the kitchen window, watching raindrops race down the glass. His mother, Sarah, had finally fallen asleep on the old couch after working another 14-hour shift at the textile factory. Her sewing machine sat silent in the corner, threads still hanging from her last rushed project. The tiny apartment felt too quiet, too still. Kai's stomach rumbled. The leftover rice from yesterday was cold and hard, but he didn't want to wake his mother. She looked so tired, her calloused hands still clutched around the cup of tea that had gone cold hours ago. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her work uniform was wrinkled from sleeping in it again. He slipped his bare feet into his worn sneakers and grabbed his small backpack. Inside was his most precious possession, a bright red toy car with tiny working headlights and a keychain screwdriver that his father had given him before he left 2 years ago. Kai didn't remember much about his father, just the smell of motor oil and the way he used to fix broken things. The creek behind their building was Kai's favorite place. Sarah always told him not to go far, just to the wooden bridge and back. The old bridge crossed the narrow water, its planks weathered gray from years of rain and sun. Local kids said it was haunted, but Kai never believed in ghosts. He believed in fixing things, like his father had taught him. As he approached the bridge, something made him freeze. A sound drifted through the afternoon air, thin, desperate, barely louder than the creek's gentle babbling. At first, he thought it might be a cat, but this cry was different, deeper, more human somehow. Kai crept closer to the bridge, his heart beating faster. The crying was coming from underneath, echoing against the wooden beams and stone supports. He dropped to his knees and crawled to the edge, peering into the shadows below. There, wedged between two warped support beams, was the most beautiful dog Kai had ever seen. A German Shepherd with thick golden and black fur, now matted with mud and creek water. One of her front paws was trapped tight between the wooden beams, and she was shivering despite the warm afternoon. Her dark eyes met Kai's, and he saw something that made his chest tight. She wasn't angry or scared. She was pleading. "Hey, girl," Kai whispered, his voice barely audible over the water. "It's okay. I'm here." The dog stopped crying and tilted her head, studying this small boy who spoke so gently. Her tail gave one weak wag, stirring the muddy water around. Her legs. Kai scrambled down the rocky bank, his sneakers slipping on wet stones. The space under the bridge was cramped and smelled like damp earth and old wood. The dog watched every movement but didn't growl or bark. Instead, she seemed to be asking for help with those intelligent eyes. Up close, Kai could see her collar, black leather but old and cracked. A metal tag hung from it, scratched and dented. He leaned closer, squinting in the dim light. Most of the letters were worn away, but he could make out 3 at the end. OVA. Ova. Kai tried the sound. The dog's ears perked up slightly. Nova? Is that your name? At the word Nova, the dog's tail wagged harder, splashing muddy water. Kai felt a warm feeling spread through his chest. He'd guessed right. "Okay, Nova, let's get you out of here." The paw was wedged tight between 2 support beams that had warped with age and weather. Nova had probably tried to squeeze through and gotten stuck. The more she'd struggled, the more swollen her paw had become. Now it was trapped completely. Kai remembered his toy car and the tiny screwdriver attached to its keychain. His father had always said the right tool could fix anything. He pulled the car from his backpack, and Nova's eyes followed the red plastic with curiosity. "This might hurt a little," Kai whispered, "but I have to help you." He worked the tiny screwdriver between the wood and Nova's paw, trying to create just enough space. The old wood was soft and damp, and small pieces flaked away as he worked. Nova whimpered softly but held perfectly still, as if she understood what he was trying to do. Kai's small fingers weren't strong enough to bend the wood much, but he noticed something. Where the beam had warped, there was a split running up toward the bridge deck. If he could widen that split just a little. He pushed the screwdriver deeper into the crack. A splinter of wood caught his thumb. slicing deep enough to draw blood. Kai gasped and jerked his hand back, watching red drops fall into the creek water. Nova stretched her neck forward and gently licked the cut on Kai's thumb. Her tongue was warm and careful, cleaning the small wound with the tenderness of a mother caring for her child. The simple act of kindness from this trapped, frightened animal made Kai's eyes water. "Thank you," he whispered. With renewed determination, Kai worked the screwdriver back into the crack. This time, he felt the wood give way with a soft crack. The gap widened just enough, and Nova carefully pulled her swollen paw free. She was limping, but she was free. Nova struggled to her feet, favoring the injured paw, and nuzzled Kai's face with her wet nose. Her tail wagged so hard her whole body wiggled. "You're welcome, girl." Kai scratched behind her ears, feeling the thick, soft fur despite the mud and tangles. "But you're hurt, and you look hungry." Nova was thin, too thin. Her ribs showed slightly beneath her coat, and her eyes had the hollow look of an animal that hadn't eaten well in days. How long had she been trapped under this bridge? Kai made a decision that would change everything. "I'll come back," he promised Nova, looking straight into her dark eyes. "I'll bring food and water and something to help your paw feel better. I promise." Nova seemed to understand. She pressed against his legs one more time, then limped deeper into the shadows under the bridge. She wasn't leaving, just finding a safer spot to wait. Kai climbed back up the bank, his mind racing. At home, his mother was still sleeping deeply. He moved quietly through their small apartment, gathering supplies. A clean dish towel from the kitchen drawer. The last piece of bread from their nearly empty cupboard. A plastic water bottle he filled at their sink. Everything went into his backpack alongside his toy car. As he zipped it closed, Kai felt like he was preparing for the most important mission of his life. He glanced at his mother one more time before leaving. Sarah's breathing was deep and even, her face finally relaxed in sleep. The worry lines that creased her forehead during the day had smoothed out. Kai didn't want to wake her. She worked so hard, and sleep was precious. But he also felt a flutter of excitement in his stomach. He had a secret now, a good secret. He was helping someone who needed him. Outside, the afternoon sun was getting lower, casting longer shadows across the small neighborhood. Kai hurried back toward the creek, his backpack bouncing against his shoulders. He couldn't wait to see Nova again, to bring her food and water, to check on her injured paw. But as he approached the wooden bridge, something made his steps slow. A black pickup truck was parked on the road nearby, not in the small parking area where people usually stopped, but pulled off to the side with two wheels in the grass. The truck was old, with a dented front fender and tinted windows that made it impossible to see inside. Kai had never seen this truck before. Their neighborhood was small enough that he recognized most of the vehicles that came and went. This one felt wrong somehow, out of place. The truck's engine was running. Kai could hear the low rumble and see exhaust drifting from the tailpipe. Someone was inside, but they weren't getting out. They weren't doing anything except sitting there, watching the bridge where Kai had just rescued Nova. A chill ran down Kai's spine that had nothing to do with the creek breeze. He crouched behind a large oak tree, his backpack pressed against his chest, and watched the truck through the lower branches. The tinted windshield reflected the sky, showing nothing of who might be inside. After what felt like forever, but was probably only a few minutes, the truck's engine revved. It pulled away from the grass and drove slowly down the road, disappearing around the bend that led back to town. Kai waited until the sound of the engine completely faded before stepping out from behind the tree. His heart was beating fast, though he couldn't explain exactly why. Maybe it was nothing, just someone who had stopped to check their phone or eat lunch. But something about the timing felt too coincidental. The truck had appeared right after he'd freed Nova, and it had been pointed toward the bridge like whoever was inside had been watching. Kai shook his head, trying to push away the worried feeling. Nova needed him, and he'd made a promise. That was more important than a mysterious truck. He scrambled down to the creek bank, calling softly, "Nova? I'm back, girl. I brought food." Nova emerged from the shadows under the bridge, her tail wagging cautiously. She was still limping, but her eyes brightened when she saw Kai's backpack. He laid out the dish towel like a small picnic blanket and placed the bread on it, then filled his cupped hands with creek water so Nova could drink. She ate the bread slowly, savoring every crumb, while Kai examined her injured paw. It was swollen, but not bleeding, and she could put some weight on it. That was good. Probably just bruised, not broken. "You need a real home," Kai said, stroking Nova's head as she finished the bread. "Somewhere safe, with people who can take care of you properly." Nova looked at him with those intelligent eyes, and Kai felt like she understood every word. But she also seemed to be trying to tell him something. Instead of settling down to rest, she kept looking toward the deeper shadows under the bridge, then back at Kai, then toward the shadows again. "What is it, girl? What are you trying to show me?" Nova limped toward the far end of the bridge supports where the shadows were darkest. She looked back at Kai, then forward into the darkness, her body language saying as clearly as words, "Follow me." Kai's curiosity won over his caution. He packed up the towel and empty water bottle, then followed Nova deeper under the bridge. The space was cramped and smelled strongly of damp earth and old wood, but Nova moved with purpose, as if she knew exactly where she was going. At the very back, where the bridge support met the creek bank, Nova stopped and began pawing at something half buried in the muddy ground. Kai knelt beside her, brushing away wet leaves and loose dirt with his hands. His fingers touched something that wasn't earth or rock, something artificial. Canvas, thick and waterproof, wrapped around something rectangular and flat. Kai worked it free from the mud, his pulse quickening with excitement and mystery. It was some kind of pouch or case, sealed tight against the water, heavy enough to contain something important. Nova sat back on her haunches and watched as Kai turned the mysterious package over in his hands, looking for a way to open it. The canvas was secured with what looked like waterproof tape, wound around and around to create a completely sealed package. Whatever was inside, someone had gone to great lengths to protect it from water and weather. Someone had hidden it here, in this exact spot under the bridge. Kai's mind raced with questions. How had Nova known it was here? Had she been guarding it? Was this why she had been trapped under the bridge in the first place? Not by accident, but because she had been staying close to protect whatever was hidden in this muddy pouch. The mysterious black truck flashed through his memory. Had someone been looking for this package? Was that why they had been watching the bridge? Nova whined softly as if urging him to hurry. The afternoon was getting later, and the shadows under the bridge were growing longer and darker. Soon, Sarah would wake up and wonder where he was. But Kai knew he couldn't leave without understanding what Nova had shown him. This felt important, more important than anything that had ever happened in his quiet, ordinary life. He worked at the tape with his fingernails, trying to find an edge he could peel back. The tape was tough and sticky, designed to resist exactly what he was trying to do. But eventually, a small corner came loose, and Kai was able to slowly unwrap the canvas pouch. Inside was a folded piece of paper and something else, something hard and rectangular, wrapped in clear plastic. Kai's breath caught as he recognized what it was. A USB drive, the kind his teacher used to show videos on the classroom computer. But why would someone hide a USB drive under a bridge? And why would they wrap it so carefully, like it contained the most precious thing in the world? The paper was folded small and tight. Kai opened it carefully, afraid it might tear. The handwriting was rushed, as if someone had been in a hurry, or scared, or both. "If you can hear the river, you're the one." That was all it said. 7 words in blue ink, written in handwriting Kai didn't recognize. No signature, no date, no explanation. Just a message that seemed to be meant for whoever found this hidden package. If you can hear the river, you're the one. Kai looked at Nova, who was watching him intently. Could she hear the river? Could he? Of course they could. The creek babbled and gurgled just a few feet away. But something about the way the message was written made Kai think it meant something more than just the physical sound of water over rocks. Nova suddenly went very still, her ears pricked forward. She was listening to something Kai couldn't yet hear. Then faintly came the sound that had caught her attention. Footsteps on the bridge above. Someone was crossing the wooden planks directly over their heads. The old bridge creaked and groaned under the weight, and Kai could track the person's progress by the sound of their steps. But these weren't the quick, light steps of a child or the steady stride of someone just passing by. These footsteps were slow, deliberate, pausing every few steps as if the person was looking for something, or someone. Nova pressed close to Kai's side, her body tense. She wasn't growling, but every muscle in her body was alert and ready. The message in her posture was clear: danger. Kai quickly rewrapped the USB drive and paper in the canvas pouch, his hands shaking slightly. Whatever he had found, it was important enough for someone to search for, important enough to hide. And now, somehow, he was part of whatever mystery surrounded this hidden package and the dog who had been guarding it. The footsteps above stopped directly over their hiding spot. Kai held his breath, pressing himself back against the muddy bank, one hand on Nova's neck to keep her quiet. Through the gaps between the bridge planks, a shadow moved back and forth, as if someone was looking down, trying to see into the space below. Then, after what felt like forever, the footsteps resumed, crossing the rest of the bridge and fading into the distance. Kai and Nova waited in perfect silence until they couldn't hear anything except the creak and their own breathing. Only then did Nova relax, settling back on her haunches with a soft sigh. But Kai's mind was spinning with new questions and fears. The black truck, the hidden package, the mysterious message, the searching footsteps. Nova hadn't just been a lost dog trapped under a bridge. She had been guarding something important enough for people to come looking for it. And now, by helping her, Kai had stumbled into a mystery much bigger and more dangerous than anything he could have imagined. He looked into Nova's dark eyes and saw intelligence there, and loyalty, and something else that made his chest tight with emotion. Trust. This brave, gentle dog was trusting him with something precious and dangerous. "I don't understand what's happening," Kai whispered, "but I promise I'll keep you safe. Whatever this is, we'll figure it out together." Nova licked his hand once, gently, and Kai knew his life had just changed forever. The quiet, ordinary world of a 5-year-old boy had suddenly become an adventure filled with mystery, danger, and the most important friendship he had ever known. But first, they needed to get away from the bridge. The person who had been searching might come back, and next time they might look more carefully under the wooden planks. Kai tucked the waterproof pouch deep into his backpack, alongside his toy car and the empty water bottle. Whatever secrets it contained would have to wait. Right now, the most important thing was keeping Nova safe. As they prepared to leave their hiding spot under the bridge, Kai had no idea that their adventure was just beginning, or that the simple act of freeing a trapped dog would lead them into a mystery that would test every ounce of courage and kindness he possessed. The next morning came too quickly. Kai had barely slept, his mind churning with thoughts of Nova, the hidden package, and those deliberate footsteps on the bridge. He'd managed to slip back into the apartment before Sarah woke, hiding his muddy clothes at the bottom of his small dresser. But lying in his narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, he couldn't stop thinking about the intelligent dog waiting for him under the bridge. Sarah was already awake when he emerged from his small bedroom, standing at their tiny stove stirring a pot of thin porridge. She looked better after her long sleep, though the worry lines around her eyes never completely disappeared. Working 16-hour days at the textile factory was killing her slowly, but it was the only job she could find that paid enough to keep their small apartment. "Morning, sweetheart," she said, not turning around. "Did you sleep okay? You were tossing and turning all night." Kai felt heat rise in his cheeks. "I slept fine, Mama." Sarah ladled the porridge into 2 chipped bowls, adding a precious spoonful of honey to Kai's portion. "You didn't go far yesterday, did you?" "When I was resting?" The question made Kai's stomach flip. Sarah never asked about his activities unless she was worried. "Just to the creek, like always." Sarah nodded, but something in her expression suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. She sat across from him at their small table, pushing her own bowl away after just a few bites. Kai knew she was giving him the larger portion again, pretending she wasn't hungry. "Mama, you should eat more," he said quietly. "I'm fine, baby. Just tired." Sarah reached across to smooth his dark hair. "Listen, I need to work a double shift again today. Mrs. Chen next door will check on you this evening, okay? Stay close to home." Kai nodded, though his heart was already racing ahead to Nova. He had to get back to her. She was injured, hungry, and alone. And now there was the mystery of the hidden package to consider. What if whoever had been searching came back? What if they found Nova? After Sarah left for work, walking slowly down the narrow street with her lunch bag and worn purse, Kai gathered supplies more carefully than he had the day before. More bread. He found an almost full loaf Sarah had been saving, a small plastic container filled with leftover rice, his own water bottle, plus an empty jam jar he could fill at the creek. The waterproof package felt heavy in his backpack, though it couldn't have weighed more than a few ounces. Every time he thought about the cryptic message, "If you can hear the river, you're the one," his pulse quickened. What did it mean? And what was on that USB drive? The morning was overcast, with heavy gray clouds that promised rain later. Perfect weather for staying hidden, Kai thought, as he made his way toward the creek. The neighborhood was quiet except for the distant sound of traffic from the main road. But as he approached the wooded area around the bridge, Kai noticed something that made him freeze behind the same oak tree where he'd hidden the day before. The black pickup truck was back. This time, it was parked differently. Not on the road, but pulled into the small clearing where local fishermen sometimes left their cars. The truck was empty, but its engine was still warm. Kai could see heat waves rising from the hood, which meant whoever had been driving it hadn't been gone long. Nova was in danger. Kai's heart hammered as he crept closer to the bridge, staying low and moving from tree to tree. He could hear voices now, at least two men talking in low, serious tones. They were under the bridge, in the exact spot where he'd found Nova yesterday. Should have been here. The dog was supposed to stay close. Maybe it ran off. Animals don't understand. This one does. She was trained. She wouldn't leave unless something spooked her or someone moved her. Kai pressed himself against the rough bark of a pine tree, trying to make sense of what he was hearing. These men knew about Nova. They had expected to find her under the bridge, but their voices didn't sound kind or worried, like people looking for a lost pet. They sounded frustrated, even angry. Check the north bank again. Look for tracks, disturbed ground, anything that shows where she might have gone. What about the package? You think someone else found it? If they did, we have bigger problems than one missing dog. Kai's blood went cold. They were looking for the canvas pouch he'd found, and they knew Nova was supposed to be guarding it, which meant Nova wasn't just a lost pet. She was part of something much bigger and more dangerous than Kai had imagined. He needed to find Nova and warn her, but first he had to know where she was. Yesterday she had limped deeper under the bridge when he left. But with these men searching the area, she might have moved to somewhere safer, or she might be trapped again, too scared to call for help. Kai waited until the voices moved farther away toward the north side of the creek, then crept down the bank on the south side. The space under the bridge looked different in the gray morning light, smaller somehow, and full of shadows that could hide threats. "Nova?" he whispered, barely breathing the word. "Girl, where are you?" For a terrible moment, there was no response. Then, from a gap between two large rocks near the creek's edge, came a soft whine. Nova's head appeared, her dark eyes wide with fear and relief. She was hiding in a space barely large enough for her body, wedged between the rocks like she was trying to make herself invisible. Her injured paw was worse today. Kai could see it was more swollen, and she was keeping all her weight off it. "It's okay," Kai whispered, crawling toward her hiding spot. "It's me. You're safe." Nova wiggled out of her hiding place and pressed against Kay's chest, her whole body trembling. She was scared in a way that went beyond her physical injuries. This was the fear of an animal who understood she was being hunted. "I know," Kai murmured, stroking her muddy fur. "I heard them too. We have to get you away from here." But where could they go? The men were searching systematically, and they clearly knew this area well. Nova was limping badly, which would slow them down. And Kai had no idea how many searchers there might be, or what they were capable of. The voices were getting closer again. Kai made a quick decision. "Come on, girl. I know a place." There was an old boathouse about a quarter-mile upstream, abandoned since the fishing company had moved to the bigger lake outside town. Kai had explored it once with some older kids, though Sarah had told him never to go there alone. The building was falling apart, but it would provide shelter and hiding places that the bridge couldn't offer. Getting there meant crossing open ground where they might be seen. But staying under the bridge was no longer safe. Kai helped Nova to her feet, supporting some of her weight as they climbed up the creek bank. The boathouse sat on a small inlet where the creek widened into a shallow pool. Half the roof had collapsed years ago, and the wooden walls were gray with age and weather. But it was isolated, surrounded by thick brush and old trees that would hide them from anyone searching the main creek area. Kai had to help Nova up the rotting steps to the main platform. Inside, the boathouse was dim and smelled of old wood and stagnant water. Broken fishing equipment lay scattered around, and bird droppings covered most surfaces. But in the back corner, where the roof was still intact, there was a dry space where Nova could rest. He spread his backpack contents on the wooden floor like a small feast. The bread, the rice, fresh water in both the bottle and the jam jar. Nova ate gratefully while Kai examined her injured paw more carefully. It was definitely worse today, hot to the touch and swollen enough that he could see it was painful. Nova needed real medical attention, not just the basic first aid a 5-year-old could provide. "You need a vet," Kai said, looking into Nova's intelligent eyes. "Someone who knows how to help hurt animals." Nova tilted her head at the word vet, and her tail gave a weak wag. Did she know that word? Had she been to a veterinarian before? As Nova finished eating, Kai pulled out the waterproof package and unwrapped it again. In the better light of the boathouse, he could see details he'd missed in the shadows under the bridge. The USB drive was black and looked expensive, not like the cheap ones his teacher used, and the paper with the cryptic message had something else written on it, very faint, in pencil, almost invisible unless you held it at just the right angle. Kai tilted the paper toward the gray light, filtering through a gap in the roof. There, numbers and letters that looked like some kind of code. SAR-86. SR-86, he repeated quietly, and Nova's reaction was immediate and startling. Her ears snapped forward, her back straightened, and she looked at Kai with sudden intense focus. She knew those letters and numbers. They meant something important to her. "What is SAR-86, girl? What does that mean?" But before Nova could respond in her own way, both of them froze at a new sound from outside the boathouse. A car engine getting closer. Then another engine, and another. Multiple vehicles were converging on their location. Kai crept to one of the broken windows and peered through the dirty glass. His heart sank. 3 vehicles were approaching through the trees. The black pickup truck and 2 others. A white van and a dark blue sedan. They were driving slowly, carefully, as if they knew exactly where they were going. The lead vehicle stopped about 50 yards from the boathouse, and Kai watched in growing terror as men began getting out. 5 of them, all wearing dark clothing, all moving with the purposeful coordination of people who had done this before. One of them was pointing toward the boathouse and talking into a handheld radio. They had found Nova's hiding place. "We have to go," Kai whispered urgently to Nova. "Right now." But Nova was no longer focused on the approaching men. Instead, she was looking toward the back of the boathouse, where a section of the floor had rotted away to reveal the dark water beneath. Her posture had changed again, no longer fearful, but alert and purposeful. She limped toward the gap in the floor and began pawing at something wedged beneath the rotting boards. Her behavior was exactly like it had been under the bridge when she'd shown him the hidden package. She was trying to show him something else. "Nova, we don't have time." But Nova interrupted with a sharp, quiet bark, the first real sound she'd made since he'd found her. It was a command, clear and urgent. She needed him to look at what she'd found. Kai hurried to her side and followed her gaze. Wedged between the rotting floorboards was another piece of waterproof material, this one bright orange like an emergency beacon. Nova pawed at it again, then looked at Kai expectantly. The men outside were getting closer. Kai could hear their voices now, coordinating their approach to the boathouse. In minutes, maybe seconds, they would be inside. But Nova was insisting this was important. And so far, everything Nova had shown him had been crucial to understanding the growing mystery around them. Kai worked the orange material free from the rotting wood. It was another sealed package, smaller than the first, but heavier. Through the clear plastic wrapping, he could see what looked like a small electronic device with a screen and several buttons. Nova watched as he unwrapped it, her expression almost proud, as if she had successfully completed an important task. The device was some kind of logger or recorder, about the size of a smartphone, but more rugged looking. Its screen was dark, but when Kai pressed what looked like a power button, it came to life with a soft beep. The screen displayed a menu with several options. Recorded data, GPS coordinates, upload status, and emergency protocols. It looked sophisticated and official, like equipment used by scientists or government agencies. But Kai didn't have time to explore its functions. The men were at the boathouse door. "Empty," called a voice from the front of the building. "But there are fresh tracks leading inside. Search every corner. The dog has to be close." Kai grabbed both packages and stuffed them into his backpack, then looked around desperately for another way out. The gap in the floor where Nova had found the device led down to dark water, but Kai couldn't tell how deep it was, or where it might lead. Nova solved the problem for him. Without hesitation, she limped to the gap and slipped into the water below. Her head appeared a moment later, looking up at Kai expectantly. The water was shallow enough for her to stand, and it looked like it connected to the main creek through a passage under the boathouse. Kai heard boots on the rotting steps outside. There was no more time for hesitation. He lowered himself through the gap in the floor, gasping as the cold creek water soaked through his clothes. Nova was already moving toward what looked like a tunnel under the building's foundation. The water was only waist deep on Kai, which meant Nova was swimming with her head just above the surface. They moved through the underwater passage as quickly and quietly as possible. Behind them, Kai could hear the men searching the boathouse, their voices echoing off the wooden walls. Fresh footprints here, and dog tracks. They were just here, spread out and checked the surrounding area. The underwater tunnel was longer than Kai had expected, and much darker. He had to feel his way along the slimy wooden supports, trying not to think about what might be living in the stagnant water. Nova stayed close beside him, her breathing the only sound besides the gentle lapping of water against wood. Finally, they emerged into daylight on the far side of the boathouse, hidden from the searchers by the building itself. Kai pulled himself up onto a muddy bank covered with tall reeds, then helped Nova climb out of the water. They were both soaked and shivering, but they were free. For now. From their hiding place in the reeds, Kai could see the men spread out around the boathouse, searching methodically. One of them was talking into his radio again, reporting their lack of success. But these weren't people who would give up easily. They would keep searching until they found what they were looking for. Nova pressed close to Kai's side, both of them dripping creek water and covered with mud. She was breathing hard from the swim, and her injured paw was clearly causing her pain. But her dark eyes were alert and focused, as if she understood the danger they were in. Kai looked down at his backpack, now heavy with 2 mysterious packages and a complicated electronic device. Whatever was happening, Nova wasn't just a lost dog, and these weren't just random searchers. This was something bigger, something organized, something that involved government-level equipment and people who had the resources to mount a coordinated search operation. "What did you get us into, girl?" Kai whispered, scratching behind Nova's wet ears. But even as he asked the question, Kai knew the real question was different. It wasn't what Nova had gotten them into. It was what someone else had gotten Nova into. Someone had trained her, given her a job to do, trusted her with secrets important enough to kill for. And now, somehow, that responsibility had fallen to a 5-year-old boy who just wanted to help a trapped animal. The men were expanding their search, moving away from the boathouse toward the main creek. Soon they would work their way around to this side of the building. Kai and Nova needed to move again, but Nova was clearly exhausted and in pain. That's when Kai heard something that made his heart leap with hope. A new voice calling from the direction of the main road. "Hello? Is someone there? I'm looking for a dog named Nova." The voice was young, female, and it sounded genuinely worried rather than threatening. Even more importantly, it had used Nova's name, her real name, not a description or a guess. Nova's reaction was immediate and dramatic. Her entire body went rigid with attention. Her ears pricked forward so sharply they looked like they might touch. Then she made a sound Kai had never heard from her before, a low, musical whine that sounded almost like singing. "That's someone you know, isn't it?" Kai whispered. Nova's tail was wagging so hard her whole back end was wiggling, despite her exhaustion and pain. This was the reaction of a dog who had found her person, but the other searchers had heard the voice too. Kai could see them changing direction, moving toward the road, instead of continuing their systematic search of the creek area. "Perfect," one of them said, his voice carrying clearly across the water. "Let's see who else is looking for our missing dog." The tone in his voice made Kai's blood run cold. Whoever this woman was, whatever her connection to Nova, she was walking into danger. The men weren't just searching for Nova. They were willing to confront anyone who might interfere with their mission. Kai made another split-second decision that would change everything. "Come on, Nova, we have to warn her." Nova was already struggling to her feet, ready to follow despite her injuries. Together, they began working their way through the tall reeds toward the sound of the voice. hoping they could reach this mysterious woman before the dangerous men did. Behind them, the abandoned boathouse sat silent in the gray morning light, its secrets partially revealed, but its greatest mysteries still hidden. And ahead of them, walking unknowingly into danger, was someone who might hold the key to understanding what Nova had been guarding, and why so. Many people were willing to risk everything to find it. The hunt was far from over, but for the first time since this adventure began, Kai felt like they might not be entirely alone. Moving through the tall reeds was like navigating a wet, green maze. Each step squelched in the muddy ground, and Kai had to constantly push aside the thick stalks that grew higher than his head. Nova stayed close beside him, her breathing labored but determined. Despite her injured paw and exhaustion from their swim, she moved with purpose toward the voice that had called her name. The woman was still calling, but her voice was getting closer to where the search team had positioned themselves. Kai could hear the men moving through the brush, no longer trying to be quiet. They were converging on the road, and soon they would intercept whoever was looking for Nova. "Nova, girl, where are you? I know you're here somewhere." The voice was clearer now, and Kai could hear the genuine worry in it. This wasn't someone working with the dangerous men. This was someone who cared about Nova, someone who was probably walking into a trap without knowing it. Kai pushed through the last of the reeds and found himself at the edge of the small parking area near the road. A young woman with short brown hair was standing beside a beat-up pickup truck, different from the black one the searchers had been using. She was wearing jeans and a veterinary clinic jacket, and she had a canvas bag slung over her shoulder that looked like it contained medical supplies. She was maybe 20 years old, with kind eyes and gentle hands that moved expressively as she called Nova's name. Everything about her suggested she was exactly what she appeared to be. Someone who cared about animals and was genuinely worried about a missing dog. But the searchers were almost close enough to see her. Kai could hear their voices getting louder as they approached through the trees. Nova made the decision for both of them. Despite her injuries, she burst from the reeds and limped rapidly toward the woman, her tail wagging so hard her whole body wiggled. The joyful whine she made was impossible to mistake. This was definitely her person. "Nova!" The woman dropped to her knees as the muddy, soaking dog reached her. "Oh my God, girl! I've been so worried. Where have you been?" She ran her hands over Nova's body, checking for injuries with the practiced efficiency of someone with medical training. When she found the swollen paw, her expression tightened with concern. "What happened to your foot, baby? And why are you so wet and muddy?" That's when she noticed Kai, standing hesitantly at the edge of the parking area. Her eyes widened as she took in his own muddy, soaking appearance. "Are you okay, sweetheart? What are you doing out here?" Before Kai could answer, the sound of approaching footsteps made Nova's ears snap forward in alarm. She positioned herself between the woman and the tree line, her body tense despite her exhaustion. "We need to go," Kai said urgently, running toward them. "Right now. There are bad men looking for Nova, and they're coming." The woman looked confused, but something in Kai's voice must have convinced her he was serious. She stood up, keeping one hand on Nova's head. "Bad men? What do you mean?" "I'll explain later, but we have to leave now." Kai looked back toward the trees where the voices were getting closer. "Please, they have trucks and radios, and they're looking for Nova and something she was guarding." The woman's expression changed instantly. The confusion was replaced by understanding and fear. She knew something about why Nova might be guarded, and she knew it was dangerous. "Get in the truck," she said quickly, opening the passenger door. "Both of you." Nova jumped into the truck without hesitation, settling in the middle of the bench seat. Kai climbed in beside her, his wet clothes soaking into the old upholstery. The woman ran around to the driver's side, just as the first of the searchers emerged from the tree line. "Hey!" one of them shouted. "Stop right there!" But the woman was already starting the engine. The old truck coughed to life, and she threw it into reverse, backing rapidly out of the parking area. Through the rear window, Kai could see the men running toward them, but they were too far away to reach the truck before it reached the road. The woman drove fast but carefully, taking turns that led away from the creek and toward the town center. She kept checking her rearview mirror, and Kai could see she was worried about being followed. "Are you hurt?" she asked Kai, glancing at him with concerned eyes. "Besides being wet and muddy, I mean." "I'm okay," Kai said, "but Nova's paw is hurt. She was trapped under the bridge and I helped her get free, but it's worse today." "Under the bridge?" The woman's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "How long was she there?" I found her yesterday afternoon. She was stuck between some wooden beams and couldn't get out." The woman was quiet for a moment, processing this information. Nova leaned against Kai's side, her breathing gradually returning to normal as they put distance between themselves and the dangerous men. "My name is Elena," the woman said finally. "I'm a veterinary student and I've been looking for Nova since yesterday evening." "How did you know her name?" Kai asked. Elena glanced at him again, and he could see her debating how much to tell him. "It's complicated, but Nova isn't just any dog. She's special, trained for very important work." That explained Nova's unusual behavior and intelligence. Kai had sensed from the beginning that she was different from ordinary pets. "What kind of work?" he asked. "Search and rescue," Elena said. "She's trained to find people in disasters, earthquakes, floods, building collapses, but she's also trained for other things, more sensitive things." Kai thought about the mysterious packages hidden under the bridge and in the boathouse. Like finding hidden things? Elena's sharp look told him he'd guessed correctly. "What do you know about hidden things?" Kai hesitated. He'd learned to be careful about trusting adults he didn't know. But Elena had risked herself to help them escape, and Nova clearly trusted her completely. "Nova showed me some things," he said carefully, "things that were hidden where she was staying. I think that's why those men were looking for her." Elena pulled into a parking lot behind a small veterinary clinic and turned off the engine. The building was modest but clean, with a sign that read, "Riverside Animal Care, Dr. Sarah Martinez, DVM." "Can you show me what Nova found?" Elena asked gently. Kai looked down at Nova, who was watching both of them with her intelligent dark eyes. He made a decision that felt right in his chest. "Okay, but first, can you help Nova's paw? It's really hurting her." "Of course," Elena said immediately. "That's the most important thing." She led them through the back door of the clinic into a small examination room. The space smelled like disinfectant and was filled with medical equipment that looked much more sophisticated than anything in Kai's experience. Elena lifted Nova onto the examination table with practiced ease, speaking to her in the soft, reassuring voice that all good veterinarians used with frightened animals. But Nova wasn't frightened. She was calm and cooperative, as if she'd been through medical examinations many times before. "Let's see what we're dealing with, girl," Elena murmured, gently examining Nova's swollen paw. She worked methodically, checking each toe and pad, flexing the joints carefully to test for breaks or dislocations. Nova held perfectly still, only flinching slightly when Elena touched the most tender spots. "Good news," Elena said, after a thorough examination. "Nothing's broken. It's badly bruised and swollen, probably from being trapped for so long, but it should heal fine with proper care." She cleaned the paw with antiseptic solution, then wrapped it in a protective bandage that would allow Nova to walk but prevent further injury. Nova submitted to the treatment with patience that impressed Kai. She really was professionally trained. "There," Elena said, scratching behind Nova's ears. "That should feel better." Nova licked Elena's hand in thanks, then looked at Kai expectantly. He understood what she was communicating. It was time to share what they had found. Kai pulled his backpack around and began unpacking its contents. First the original waterproof package with the USB drive and cryptic note, then the orange package containing the data logger. Elena's eyes widened as each item appeared. "Where exactly did you find these?" she asked, her voice tight with excitement and worry. "The first one was under the bridge where Nova was trapped," Kai explained. "She showed me where to dig for it. The second one was hidden in an old boathouse where we went to hide from the men who were searching." Elena picked up the data logger and turned it over in her hands. The device looked familiar to her. She clearly knew what it was and what it might contain. "This is Dr. Hassan's field recorder," she said quietly. "He's been missing for almost a week." "Who's Dr. Hassan?" Kai asked. Elena was quiet for a moment, clearly struggling with how much to explain to a 5-year-old. Finally, she seemed to make a decision. "Dr. Hassan is Nova's handler, her partner. They work together on search and rescue missions, but they were also investigating something dangerous, something that some very bad people didn't want them to find." Kai felt a chill run down his spine. "What kind of dangerous thing?" "The kind that gets people hurt when they ask too many questions," Elena said gently. Dr. Hassan was worried that someone was doing illegal things that could hurt lots of people. He was gathering evidence to prove it. She gestured toward the packages Kai had found. This evidence? Elena turned on the data logger and navigated to the recorded data section. The screen filled with timestamps, GPS coordinates, and what looked like environmental readings, water levels, flow rates, soil displacement measurements. These are readings from the river system, she explained. Dr. Hassan was monitoring water levels and erosion patterns around the flood control gates. Why would that be dangerous? Kai asked. Elena's expression darkened. Because someone has been manipulating the floodgates illegally, opening them when they shouldn't be opened, closing them when they should be open. It's affecting water flow patterns and causing erosion that could lead to serious flooding. But why would someone do that? Money, Elena said simply. There's a company that's been doing illegal sand mining upstream. They need the water levels to be just right for their operation. So they've been bribing someone to control the floodgates, but they're causing damage that could kill people during the next big storm. Kai thought about the creek near his home, and about all the families who lived in the low-lying areas that would flood if the water levels weren't properly controlled. His own apartment was safe, but he knew kids at school whose homes were much closer to the flood zone. Dr. Hassan was going to expose them, Elena continued, but then he disappeared during what was supposed to be a routine training exercise with Nova. She came back alone, and she'd been missing for 2 days before you found her. Nova whined softly at the mention of Dr. Hassan's name. The sound was full of sadness and worry. She missed her partner and didn't understand why he hadn't come back. Elena gently petted Nova's head. That's why she was guarding these packages. Dr. Hassan must have hidden them and trained her to stay close until someone found them. Someone he could trust. But how would he know who to trust? Kai asked. Elena smiled for the first time since they'd met. The note you found. If you can hear the river, you're the one. Dr. Hassan always said that Nova was the best judge of character he'd ever met. If she accepted someone, if she let them help her, then they were someone who could hear what the river was really saying. What does that mean? It means you listen to what's really happening, instead of just what people tell you is happening, Elena explained. Nova trusted you because you heard her crying and came to help, even though you didn't know her. You listened to what she needed instead of what might be easier or safer for yourself. Kai felt a warm glow in his chest. Nova had chosen him, and Dr. Hassan had trusted that choice even before he made it. But the warm feeling was interrupted by a sound that made all three of them freeze. Car engines outside the clinic, multiple vehicles approaching fast. Elena moved quickly to the window and peered through the blinds. Her face went pale. "They've found us," she whispered. "The black truck and 2 others. They're surrounding the building." Nova jumped down from the examination table, favoring her bandaged paw, but moving with purpose. She positioned herself between Kai and the door, her body tense and alert. "Is there another way out?" Kai asked urgently. Elena nodded, grabbing the packages and stuffing them into a medical supply bag. "Through the back, but we need to move now." Outside they could hear car doors slamming, and the sound of men's voices coordinating their approach. These weren't people who would give up easily, and they clearly had the resources to track down anyone who interfered with their plans. "Who are they?" Kai asked as Elena led them toward the back exit. "People who have too much money and too much power," Elena said grimly. "People who think they can do whatever they want because no one will stop them." She opened the back door carefully, checking to make sure the area was clear. "But they're wrong. We're going to stop them." "We are?" Elena looked down at Kai, and he saw determination in her eyes that matched Nova's intelligence and loyalty. "Yes, because Dr. Hassan trusted Nova to find the right person to help, and Nova chose you. That makes you part of this team now." Kai felt scared and excited and proud all at the same time. He was part of something important now, something that could help protect people from danger. And he had Nova and Elena to help him figure out what to do. "Where are we going?" he asked as they slipped out the back door. "Somewhere safe, where we can figure out what's on that USB drive and plan our next move," Elena said. "Doctor, Hassan left instructions for emergencies like this?" Behind them, the sound of the front door being forced open echoed through the clinic. The dangerous men had found the building, but they were too late. Kai, Nova, and Elena were already. disappearing into the maze of back alleys and side streets that would take them to safety. But as they hurried through the narrow passages between buildings, Kai couldn't shake the feeling that they were still being watched, that somewhere in the growing shadows of late afternoon, someone was tracking their movements and planning their next approach. The game of cat and mouse was far from over, but now the mouse had allies, and they were beginning to understand just how high the stakes really were. Nova limped along beside them, her professional training evident in the way she stayed alert for threats while still trusting Elena and Kai to guide her to safety. She was no longer just a lost dog. She was a partner in a mission that could save lives. And Kai was no longer just a 5-year-old boy looking for adventure. He was carrying secrets that powerful people would kill to protect. And he was beginning to understand that sometimes the most important thing you could do was refuse to look away when something was wrong. The evidence in Elena's medical bag could expose the illegal operation and bring justice for Dr. Hassan's disappearance. But first, they had to stay alive long enough to get it to the right people. As they reached the end of the alley system and prepared to cross a busy street, Elena stopped and looked back at Kai. "Are you sure you want to do this?" she asked seriously. "Once we take the next step, there's no going back. These people will know you're involved, and that could put you and your family in danger." Kai looked down at Nova, who was watching him with those intelligent dark eyes. She had trusted him with the most important thing in her world, the evidence that could bring justice for her missing partner. How could he let her down now? "Nova chose me," he said simply. "I can't quit on her." Elena smiled, and for the first time since they'd met, it was a smile without any fear or worry in it. "Doctor, Hassan was right. Nova really is the best judge of character." Together, the unlikely team stepped out into the busy afternoon street, ready to take on dangers that most adults would find terrifying. But they had something their enemies didn't expect: the unbreakable bond between a boy who listened to what others needed and a dog who had learned to trust in the goodness of strangers. The real adventure was just beginning. Elena led them through a maze of side streets and back alleys that she seemed to know by heart. The veterinary clinic was in the older part of town, where the buildings were close together and the narrow passages between them created perfect hiding spots for anyone who knew how to use them. Nova stayed close to Kai's side, her newly bandaged paw making soft clicking sounds on the pavement, but not slowing her down. Her professional training was evident in the way she constantly scanned their surroundings, alert for threats but trusting Elena to choose their route. "Where are we going?" Kai asked as they paused at the corner of a narrow alley to check the street ahead. "My apartment," Elena said, peering around the corner before waving them forward. "It's small, but it's safe, and Dr. Hassan gave me some things to keep in case of emergency." They crossed the street quickly and entered another series of connected alleys. This part of town was quiet in the late afternoon, with most people either at work or already home for dinner. The few pedestrians they passed paid no attention to a young woman, a small boy, and a limping dog. They looked like any ordinary family out for a walk. But Kai kept glancing over his shoulder, unable to shake the feeling that they were being followed. The men in the black trucks had shown they were organized and persistent. They wouldn't give up just because their targets had escaped the veterinary clinic. Elena's apartment was on the 3rd floor of a converted warehouse building. The stairs were narrow and steep, challenging for Nova with her injured paw, but she managed them with determination. Elena unlocked 3 different locks on her door before finally letting them inside. The apartment was small but comfortable, with large windows that had been covered with heavy curtains. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with veterinary textbooks and journals. A small kitchen occupied one corner, and a fold-out couch suggested that Elena didn't have many overnight guests. "Make yourselves comfortable," Elena said, immediately going to one of the bookshelves and pulling out what looked like a veterinary manual. But when she opened it, Kai could see it had been hollowed out to create a hiding place. "Doctor, Hassan wasn't just paranoid," she explained, pulling several items from the hidden compartment. "He knew that if his investigation went wrong, he might not be able to get evidence to the right people through normal channels." She spread the items on her small dining table. There was another USB drive, several official-looking documents, and what appeared to be a list of names and phone numbers. "Backup plans," Elena said. "Doctor, Hassan always said that the most important evidence should be hidden in at least 3 places, and copies should be given to at least 3 different people. Nova limped over to the table and sniffed at the items. Her tail wagged weakly. These things smelled like Dr. Hassan, and that gave her comfort even though her partner was still missing. So, the packages Nova was guarding weren't the only evidence? Kai asked. No, but they were probably the most complete, Elena said, pulling out her laptop computer. The USB drive you found should have the original data files. This one, she held up the drive from the book, has copies and backup documentation. She plugged both USB drives into her laptop and waited for them to load. The computer screen filled with folders containing hundreds of files. Photographs, audio recordings, spreadsheets full of numbers, and official documents with government letterheads. This is incredible, Elena whispered, scrolling through the files. Dr. Hassan documented everything. Look at this. She opened a folder labeled Timeline that contained a detailed chronology of the illegal floodgate operations. Each entry included dates, times, water level readings, and photographs showing the gates in positions they shouldn't have been in. Here, Elena pointed to a series of entries from the previous month. Every time the sand mining company needed specific water levels for their operation, someone opened or closed the floodgates to accommodate them. But look at these projected flood risk calculations. She opened another file that showed computer models predicting water flow and flood patterns. The illegal gate manipulations had created a situation where the next major storm could cause catastrophic flooding in residential areas downstream. How many people could be hurt? Kai asked, thinking of his schoolmates who lived near the creek. Hundreds, Elena said grimly. Maybe thousands if the timing is wrong. The flood control system was designed to protect everyone, but now it's been turned into a weapon. Nova made a soft whining sound and nudged Kai's hand with her nose. She seemed to understand that they were looking at evidence of something that could hurt many people. Elena continued scrolling through the files, her expression growing more serious with each new document she opened. Look at this, she said, opening a folder labeled Financial Records. The screen filled with bank statements, wire transfer records, and financial documents showing large payments flowing between several different accounts. Someone was getting paid a lot of money to manipulate those floodgates, Elena said, and they weren't just taking bribes. They were actively invested in the sand mining operation. She opened another file that contained photographs of official documents, permits, environmental impact assessments, and regulatory filings. But many of the documents had been altered or falsified. Dr. Hassan found proof that they forged government permits, Elena explained. The sand mining operation was never legally authorized for the scope of work they're doing. They're stealing resources and destroying the environment, and they're paying government officials to help them cover it up. Kai felt overwhelmed by the complexity of what Dr. Hassan had uncovered. It wasn't just one crime, it was a whole network of illegal activities that involved stealing, lying, bribery, and putting innocent people in danger. Who do we tell? He asked. Who can stop them? Elena was quiet for a moment, scrolling through the list of contacts, Doctor. Hassan had left. That's the problem. Some of the people who are supposed to stop crimes like this are the same people taking money to allow them. She pointed to several names on the contact list. Dr. Hassan identified at least 3 officials in the flood control department who are part of the scheme, and probably more in other departments. So, we can't trust the police? We can trust some of them, Elena said. Dr. Hassan identified several people who are definitely clean, people who can't be bought and who care more about protecting people than protecting their own careers. She found a name on the list and highlighted it. Officer Malik Zubair. Dr. Hassan worked with him on several rescue operations, and he's known for being completely honest. If we can get this evidence to him, he'll know what to do with it. But before Elena could continue explaining their options, Nova suddenly went rigid with alertness. Her ears snapped forward and her body tensed, focused on something only she could hear. Then Kai heard it too, the sound of footsteps in the hallway outside Elena's apartment. Slow, deliberate footsteps that stopped right outside her door. Elena immediately minimized the computer screen and moved to the window, peering carefully through a gap in the curtains. Her face went pale. "They found us again," she whispered. 3 men in the hallway, and I can see more vehicles outside. The footsteps outside were joined by others, at least 3 people positioned outside Elena's door. Then came the sound Kai had been dreading. A soft knock. "Elena Rodriguez?" called a voice through the door. "My name is Marcus Crane. I'm with the Regional Animal Control Authority. I need to speak with you about a dangerous dog that's been reported in this area." Elena's hands clenched into fists. "Marcus Crane," she whispered to Kai. "Doctor." Hassan mentioned him in his files. "He's one of the people taking money from the sand mining company." The voice outside continued, still polite, but with an underlying threat. "I know you're in there, Elena, and I know you have the dog with you. This doesn't have to be difficult if you cooperate." Nova positioned herself between Kai and the door, her body low and ready. Despite her injured paw, she looked prepared to defend them if necessary. "We need a way out," Elena whispered, looking around her small apartment desperately. Kai remembered something from his exploration of the building when they'd climbed the stairs. "The fire escape," he said quietly. "I saw it outside the window at the end of the hall." Elena nodded, quickly saving the files they'd been viewing to a cloud storage account on her laptop. "Good thinking, but we need to be quiet." The knocking came again, more insistent this time. "Elena, I'm going to count to 10. If you don't open this door, I'm going to assume you need assistance and I'll have to use emergency protocols." Elena grabbed the USB drives and stuffed them into her medical bag, along with the other evidence Dr. Hassan had left. She motioned for Kai and Nova to follow her toward the apartment's back window. 1, 2, 3. Elena carefully unlocked her window, wincing as the old frame creaked slightly. The fire escape was a narrow metal platform with stairs leading down to the alley behind the building. 4, 5, 6. Nova went first, moving carefully on her injured paw, but managing the transition from window to fire escape without difficulty. Kai followed, his heart pounding so hard he was sure everyone in the building could hear it. 7, 8. Elena climbed through the window last, pulling it closed behind her, just as they heard the unmistakable sound of the apartment door being forced open. 9, 10. Voices inside the apartment confirmed that the men had entered. They would discover the empty rooms in seconds, and then they would search the building systematically. Elena led them down the fire escape as quietly as possible. The metal stairs were old and rusty, creaking softly under their weight, despite their careful movements. Every sound seemed impossibly loud in the quiet evening air. They had almost reached the ground level when a shout from above indicated that their escape had been discovered. "They went out the window! Check the alley!" Elena jumped the last few feet to the ground, then caught Nova as Kai helped her down from the fire escape. They could hear running footsteps on the metal stairs above them. Their pursuers were following the same route. "This way," Elena whispered, leading them toward the mouth of the alley. But as they reached the street, they saw 2 of the black vehicles positioned to block their escape routes. The men had anticipated that they might try to flee through the back of the building. "We're trapped," Kai said, looking back and forth between the vehicles and the sound of approaching footsteps behind them. Nova made a decision that surprised both of them. Instead of cowering or preparing to fight, she limped directly toward the nearest black vehicle, her tail wagging slightly. "Nova, no," Elena whispered urgently. But Nova seemed to know something they didn't. As she approached the vehicle, a figure emerged from the driver's seat. Not one of the threatening men they'd been fleeing from, but a uniformed police officer with kind eyes and a gentle manner. "Easy, girl," the officer said softly, extending his hand for Nova to sniff. "I've been looking for you." Nova's tail wagged harder, and she pressed against the officer's legs with obvious relief and recognition. "Officer Zubair?" Elena called tentatively. The officer looked up and smiled. "Elena Rodriguez? Dr. Hassan told me I might hear from you if things went wrong. And judging by the fact that you're climbing down fire escapes with Nova and a very brave young man, I'd say things have definitely gone wrong." Kai felt a rush of relief so intense it made his knees weak. Officer Zubair was one of the good guys, one of the people Dr. Hassan had trusted completely. "How did you find us?" Elena asked, hurrying toward the police car with Kai close behind. "I've been monitoring radio chatter from some unofficial sources," Officer Zubair explained, opening the back door of his car for them. "When Marcus Crane started organizing search teams and requesting backup for dangerous animal retrieval, I knew he was looking for Nova, and I knew that if he was looking for her, she probably had something he didn't want anyone else to find." As they climbed into the police car, Kai could see the men from Elena's apartment building emerging into the alley, But when they saw the police vehicle, they immediately retreated back into the shadows. "They won't try anything with me here," Officer Zubair said, starting the engine. "But we need to get you somewhere safe while we figure out our next move." Nova settled between Kai and Elena in the back seat, her injured paw stretched out carefully, and her breathing finally returning to normal. For the first time since their adventure had begun, they were with someone who had the authority and integrity to help them. "Did Dr. Hassan tell you what Nova was guarding?" Elena asked as they drove through the quiet evening streets. "He told me enough," Officer Zubair said. "He said that if anything happened to him, Nova would find someone trustworthy to help her, and that person would have evidence that could save a lot of lives." Kai felt proud that Nova had chosen him, and grateful that Dr. Hassan's plan had worked even better than expected. Not only had Nova found someone to help her, but that person had led them to exactly the right allies. "Where are we going?" Elena asked. "Police headquarters," Officer Zubair said, "but not the main building. Dr. Hassan and I identified several officers who can be trusted completely. We're going to meet with them and plan how to use this evidence safely." As they drove through the darkening streets, Kai looked out the window at the normal evening activities of his town. People walking home from work, children playing in yards, families gathered around dinner tables visible through lit windows. All of these people were potentially in danger from the next big storm, if the flood control system wasn't fixed. But now they had a chance to protect them. The evidence Dr. Hassan had died trying to gather was safely in their hands, and they had found allies who could help them use it effectively. Nova rested her head on Kai's lap, finally relaxed enough to show how exhausted she was from their day of escaping and hiding. Her professional training had kept her alert and focused when they needed it, but now she could finally rest. "You did good, girl," Kai whispered, scratching behind her ears. "Doctor, Hassan would be proud of you." Nova's tail wagged weakly, and she made a soft sound that might have been agreement. She had completed her mission. The evidence was safe, and it was in the hands of people who could use it to help others. But Kai had a feeling their adventure wasn't over yet. People with enough money and power to corrupt government officials wouldn't give up easily just because their first attempts to recover the evidence had failed. They would try again, and next time they might be more desperate and more dangerous. Outside the police car windows, the first streetlights were beginning to come on as evening settled over the town. Storm clouds were gathering on the horizon, a reminder that time was running out to fix the flood control system before the next major weather event. The evidence in Elena's medical bag could save hundreds or thousands of lives. But first, they had to make sure it reached the right people before the wrong people silenced them forever. Officer Zubair caught Kai's eyes in the rearview mirror and smiled reassuringly. "Don't worry, son. We're going to make sure the people responsible for this pay for what they've done. And we're going to make sure the flood control system is fixed before anyone gets hurt." Kai nodded, feeling safer than he had since this adventure began. But he also felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. He wasn't just a 5-year-old boy anymore. He was a witness to corruption and a guardian of evidence that could change everything. Nova had chosen him because she knew he would listen to what the river was really saying. Now, it was time to make sure everyone else listened too. Officer Zubair drove them through the quiet streets to a small police substation on the outskirts of town. Unlike the main headquarters with its busy parking lot and constant activity, this building looked almost abandoned, but Kai could see lights in the windows and the subtle signs of people moving around inside. "Safe house," Officer Zubair explained as he parked behind the building. "Dr. Hassan and I set this up months ago when we first realized how deep the corruption went. Only officers we absolutely trust know about this place." As they climbed out of the car, Nova tested her weight on her bandaged paw and seemed satisfied that it was healing properly. The professional alertness was back in her posture. She knew they were entering another phase of their mission. Inside, the substation had been converted into something that looked more like a detective's office than a regular police facility. Maps covered the walls, showing the river system, flood zones, and the locations of various industrial operations. A large table in the center of the room was covered with documents, photographs, and computer equipment. 3 other police officers were waiting for them, all wearing civilian clothes rather than uniforms. Officer Zubair introduced them quickly: Detective Sarah Chen, Sergeant Mike Rodriguez, and Officer Jenny Park. Each of them shook hands with Elena and nodded kindly to Kai, but their attention was immediately drawn to Nova. "So, this is the famous Nova," Detective Chen said, kneeling down to Nova's level. "Dr. Hassan talked about you constantly. He said you were the smartest partner he'd ever worked with." Nova's tail wagged at the mention of Dr. Hassan's name, but Kai could see the sadness in her eyes. She missed her partner and didn't understand why he hadn't come back for her. "What's the situation?" Elena asked, setting her medical bag on the table. "How bad is it?" Officer Zubair pulled up a weather report on one of the computers. "Worse than we thought. There's a major storm system moving in from the west. If it hits us with the floodgates in their current position, we're looking at a potential disaster." The weather map showed a massive storm front approaching their region. Red and orange areas indicated heavy rainfall and possible flash flooding. The storm was expected to arrive within the next 48 hours. 48 hours! Sergeant Rodriguez repeated grimly. "That's how long we have to expose this corruption and get the flood control system reset to its proper configuration." Elena opened her medical bag and pulled out the USB drives and documents they had recovered. "Dr. Hassan's evidence should be enough to prove everything. Financial records, falsified permits, recorded conversations. It's all here." Detective Chen plugged one of the USB drives into a computer and began scrolling through the files. Her expression grew more serious with each folder she opened. "This is incredible," she said. "Dr. Hassan documented everything. Look at this." She opened a video file that showed Dr. Hassan speaking directly to the camera. He looked tired and worried, but his voice was clear and determined. "If you're watching this, something has happened to me," Dr. Hassan's recorded voice said. "But Nova has done her job, and the evidence has reached people who can use it. The flood control system has been compromised by a network of corrupt officials working with Meridian Sand Mining Corporation." The video continued with Dr. Hassan explaining the technical details of how the floodgates had been manipulated and why it was so dangerous. He named specific officials, showed financial records proving the bribery, and demonstrated how the illegal sand mining operation was destroying the natural flood barriers that protected residential areas. "The next major storm will cause catastrophic flooding in the Riverside District, Meadowbrook Village, and the entire Lower Creek area," Dr. Hassan's recorded voice explained. "Hundreds of families will lose their homes, people will die, unless the flood control system is immediately reset and the illegal mining operation is shut down." Kai felt a chill run down his spine. His own apartment was on the edge of the Lower Creek area. If Dr. Hassan was right, his home and his mother could be in danger when the storm hit. "We have to stop them," Kai said quietly, but with a determination that surprised even him. Officer Park looked at him with respect. "That's exactly what we're going to do, but we need to be smart about it. These people have money, power, and connections. If we move too fast or make mistakes, they'll find ways to discredit the evidence, or make it disappear." Detective Chen was still reviewing the files, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she cross-referenced different documents. "We need to move tonight," she said suddenly. "Look at this." She opened a file containing internal communications from Meridian Sand Mining Corporation. The messages were encrypted, but Dr. Hassan had somehow obtained the decryption keys. "They're planning to accelerate their operation," Detective Chen read from the screen. Quote, "Asset recovery must be completed before weather event, floodgate manipulation on standby for emergency protocols. All evidence containers must be secured or neutralized by 0600 hours. "Asset recovery," Sergeant Rodriguez repeated. "They're not just looking for the evidence Dr. Hassan hid. They're planning to strip mine as much material as possible before the storm hits, then use the flood damage to cover their tracks." Elena looked up from the documents she'd been reviewing. "And evidence containers must be secured or neutralized. That means they're planning to destroy any proof of what they've done. Including us," Officer Zubair added grimly. "We're evidence containers now too." Nova had been listening to the conversation with the intense focus that Kai had learned to recognize. Now she moved to the map on the wall and began pawing at a specific location along the river. "What is it, girl?" Detective Chen asked, following Nova's gaze. Nova continued pawing at the same spot on the map, then looked back at the humans expectantly. She was trying to tell them something important. Kai studied the location Nova was indicating. It was marked as Flood Control Station Number 3, and appeared to be one of the main gate complexes that controlled water flow for the entire downstream area. The main control station, Officer Park realized. If they're planning to cause maximum damage during the storm, that's where they'd need to manipulate the gates. Elena found another file on Dr. Hassan's USB drive labeled Station Number 3 Security Protocols. She opened it to reveal detailed blueprints and security information for the flood control facility. Dr. Hassan was planning to expose them in the act, she said, studying the documents. Look at these surveillance photos. He documented multiple unauthorized visits to the control station by Meridian sand mining personnel. The photos showed men in corporate suits accessing the flood control facility outside of normal business hours. Some of the faces were clear enough to identify, and several matched names on Dr. Hassan's list of corrupt officials. He was building a case to catch them red-handed, Sergeant Rodriguez said. But something went wrong during his final surveillance mission. Nova whined softly at the mention of surveillance missions. Kai reached down to comfort her, and as he did, he noticed something he'd missed before. Nova's collar had a small attachment that looked like a tiny camera or recording device. "Elena," he said excitedly, "look at Nova's collar." Elena examined the device, and her eyes widened. "It's a micro-recorder. Dr. Hassan used these for field documentation. If Nova was with him during his final mission..." She carefully detached the device and connected it to one of the computers. After a few moments, a new set of files appeared on the screen. Audio and video recordings from Nova's perspective during her last mission with Dr. Hassan. The final recording was time-stamped just 4 days ago. It showed Dr. Hassan and Nova approaching the flood control station in the early morning darkness. Dr. Hassan's voice was barely a whisper as he narrated what they were seeing. "Significant activity at Station Number 3. Unauthorized personnel accessing gate controls. Nova and I are moving closer to document the illegal manipulation." The video showed them creeping through the shadows toward the control facility. Through Nova's camera, they could see several men working at the computer terminals that controlled the floodgates. Then, something went wrong. Shouts erupted from the facility, and the camera shook violently as Nova and Dr. Hassan were forced to run. The audio picked up Dr. Hassan's urgent voice. "Nova, Emergency Protocol 7. Take the evidence to the bridge and wait for someone who can hear the river." The recording ended abruptly, but it was enough to confirm what had happened. Dr. Hassan had been caught during his final surveillance mission, and he'd used his last moments to make sure Nova could complete their mission without him. "Emergency Protocol 7, Detective Chen repeated. That must be why Nova was guarding the evidence packages. She was following Dr. Hassan's final order. Nova pressed against Kai's legs, and he could feel her trembling slightly. Watching the recording of her partner's last mission was bringing back painful memories. "You did everything right," Kai whispered to her. "You found help, just like Dr. Hassan told you to." Officer Zubair was studying the timestamp on the recording. This was taken at 0347 hours 4 days ago. If we can prove that Dr. Hassan was at the flood control station at that time, and if we can show that the gate manipulations documented in his evidence match the current dangerous configuration, we'll have proof of murder, Sergeant Rodriguez finished. Dr. Hassan didn't just disappear during a training exercise. He was killed because he discovered a conspiracy that threatens thousands of lives. The room fell silent as the weight of what they'd discovered settled over them. This wasn't just about corruption or environmental damage anymore. Dr. Hassan had died protecting evidence that could save lives, and now it was up to them to make sure his sacrifice meant something. But their moment of reflection was interrupted by a sound that made Nova's ears snap to attention. Vehicles approaching the substation, multiple engines moving fast. Detective Chen immediately moved to the window and peered through the blinds. 4 vehicles, black SUVs. They found us again. "How is that possible?" Elena asked. No one else knew about this location. Officer Zubair's expression was grim. "Someone's been tracking us, either through our phones, our vehicles, or..." He looked around the room suspiciously. "Or we have a leak in the department." The sound of car doors slamming echoed through the quiet evening air. Then came a voice amplified by a bullhorn. "This is Marcus Crane with Regional Animal Control. The building is surrounded. Send out the dangerous animal and no one will be hurt." "Dangerous animal," Officer Park repeated angrily. He's calling Nova dangerous because she's the evidence that will destroy his operation. Nova positioned herself between Kai and the front of the building, her body tense and ready despite her injured paw. She understood that the men outside were the same ones who had hurt Dr. Hassan. "We need an escape plan," Detective Chen said, quickly copying Dr. Hassan's files to multiple backup drives. "The evidence has to survive even if we don't." But Sergeant Rodriguez was studying the building's layout with a different expression. "Wait, we don't have to run. This is still a police facility, and we're still police officers. Crane may have connections, but he doesn't have jurisdiction here." Officer Zubair smiled grimly. "Mike's right. Let's see how far Crane is willing to go when he's confronting actual law enforcement instead of civilians." He opened the front door of the substation and stepped outside, his police badge clearly visible and his hand resting casually on his service weapon. The other officers flanked him, presenting a united front. "Mr. Crane," Officer Zubair called out calmly, "you're trespassing on police property. State your business or leave the premises." Marcus Crane emerged from one of the black SUVs, flanked by several men who were clearly not animal control officers. They were dressed in military-style gear and carried equipment that looked more suitable for a raid than a rescue operation. "Officer Zubair," Crane said, his voice carrying a tone of false reasonableness, "I'm here on official business. We have reports of a dangerous animal that's been involved in multiple incidents. I need to take custody of that animal for public safety." "What incidents?" Detective Chen asked, stepping up beside Officer Zubair. "I don't see any incident reports in our system." Crane's polite mask slipped slightly. "The incidents may not have been officially reported yet, but I have authority to act preemptively when public safety is at risk." "Show me your warrant," Sergeant Rodriguez demanded. "Show me official documentation giving you authority to enter a police facility and seize evidence." The word evidence hit Crane like a physical blow. His expression hardened, and the pretense of official animal control business evaporated completely. "I don't need a warrant to protect public safety," he said, gesturing to his men. "That animal is dangerous, and I'm taking it into custody. Anyone who interferes will be charged with obstruction." But Officer Park was already on her radio, calling for backup from the main police station. "This is Officer Park at Substation 7. We have multiple armed individuals trespassing on police property and making threats against law enforcement personnel. Request immediate backup." Crane realized his bluff had been called. He couldn't maintain the pretense of legitimate authority when confronted by actual police officers who knew their rights and weren't intimidated by his resources. "You're making a mistake," he said, backing toward his vehicle. "You don't understand who you're dealing with or how much power we have." "We understand perfectly," Officer Zubair replied. "We're dealing with criminals who think money and connections put them above the law, but you're wrong." The sound of approaching sirens began to echo through the evening air. Crane's backup was arriving, but so was legitimate police backup from the main station. "This isn't over," Crane warned, climbing back into his SUV. "You can't protect that evidence forever, and when the storm hits tomorrow night, everyone will be too busy dealing with the flooding to worry about your conspiracy theories." As Crane's vehicles pulled away, Officer Zubair turned to his team with the expression of renewed determination. "Did you hear that? He just confirmed that they're planning to use the storm tomorrow night. That means we have less than 24 hours to expose this conspiracy and get the flood control system reset." Back inside the substation, Nova had remained calm throughout the confrontation. She seemed to understand that the good officers had successfully protected them from the bad ones. But her professional instincts were telling her that the mission wasn't complete yet. She moved back to the map on the wall and pawed again at Flood Control Station number 3. Then she looked at Kai with an expression that clearly said, "We need to go there." "She's right," Elena said, following Nova's gaze. "If we're going to stop them, we need to get to the Flood Control Station before they can complete their sabotage." Detective Chen was already putting together a tactical plan. "It won't be easy. They'll have the station under guard, and they'll be expecting us now that they know we have Dr. Hassan's evidence." "But we have something they don't expect," Kai said quietly, scratching behind Nova's ears. "We have Nova. She knows the station, she knows their security, and she knows exactly what they're trying to hide." Officer Zubair looked down at the brave 5-year-old boy who had stumbled into the most important police investigation of his career. "Are you sure you want to see this through? It's going to be dangerous and we can't guarantee your safety." Kai looked at Nova, who was watching him with complete trust and confidence. He thought about Dr. Hassan, who had died protecting people he'd never met. He thought about his mother and all the families who would lose everything if the flood control system wasn't fixed before the storm hit. "Nova chose me to help her," he said simply. "I can't quit on her now, and I can't let those bad people hurt my mom or anyone else." Detective Chen smiled and handed Kai one of the backup USB drives. "Then you're officially part of this investigation. Welcome to the team." As the police backup arrived outside and the substation became a flurry of activity, Kai felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders once again. But this time, it didn't feel scary. It felt right. Tomorrow night, when the storm hit, the flood control system would either save lives or destroy them. And the difference would be determined by what Nova, Kai, and their allies could accomplish in the next 24 hours. The evidence was secure, the team was assembled, and the mission was clear. All that remained was the most dangerous part: confronting the criminals at their own stronghold and making sure the truth came to light before it was too late. The storm arrived ahead of schedule. By dawn, dark clouds were already gathering on the horizon, and the Weather Service had upgraded their warnings to severe flooding likely for the entire river valley. Rain began falling in steady sheets, turning the normally gentle creek into a rushing torrent that lapped dangerously close to its banks. Officer Zubair's team had worked through the night, coordinating with state authorities and federal agencies to prepare for the confrontation at Flood Control Station number 3. But as the morning progressed, it became clear that Crane's people were accelerating their timeline too. "They're making their move," Detective Chen announced, hanging up from a call with their surveillance team. "Multiple vehicles converged on the flood control station an hour ago. They're not waiting for tonight. They're manipulating the gates now, while the storm builds." Kai looked out the window of the substation at the steadily falling rain. In the distance, he could see the creek rising higher than he'd ever seen it before. The water was already lapping at the edges of neighborhoods that should have been safe. "How long do we have?" Elena asked, checking Nova's bandaged paw one more time. "Maybe 6 hours before the main storm hits," Sergeant Rodriguez said, studying the latest weather reports. "If the gates aren't reset by then, the flood zones will be underwater within minutes of the peak rainfall." Nova had been restless all morning, pacing back and forth in front of the map that showed Flood Control Station number 3. She knew they were running out of time, and her body language suggested she was ready to complete the mission with or without human help. "She's right," Officer Zubair said, watching Nova's anxious movements. "We can't wait any longer. If we don't move, now thousands of people are going to lose everything they have." The plan they'd developed was risky but straightforward, a 3-pronged approach. Detective Chen would lead a team to arrest Marcus Crane and his co-conspirators at their mining operation headquarters. Sergeant Rodriguez would coordinate with emergency services to begin evacuating the flood zones. And Officer Zubair would take Kai, Elena, and Nova to Flood Control Station number 3 to reset the gates and secure the final evidence. "I should stay here," Kai said quietly as they prepared to leave. "I'm just a kid. I'll slow you down when you need to move fast." But Nova immediately moved to his side and pressed against his legs, her dark eyes fixed on his face with unmistakable determination. "Nova disagrees," Elena said with a small smile. "And so do I. You're not just a kid anymore, Kai. You're the person Nova trusted with the most important secret in the world. That makes you essential to this mission." Officer Zubair knelt down to Kai's level. "Besides, Nova knows the station better than any of us, and she clearly works best when you're with her. We need both of you." As they loaded into Officer Zubair's patrol car, the rain intensified from a steady shower to a driving downpour. The windshield wipers struggled to keep the glass clear, and the roads were already showing signs of water accumulation in the low-lying areas. Nova sat between Kai and Elena in the back seat, her professional alertness heightened by the approaching storm, and the anticipation of returning to the place where Dr. Hassan had disappeared. She knew this was the final phase of their mission. The flood control station was located on a hill overlooking the main river channel, about 15 minutes drive from the substation under normal conditions. But the storm was making travel difficult, and they had to navigate around several roads that were already flooding. "There," Officer Zubair said, pointing through the rain-streaked windshield. Flood control station number 3 was a complex of concrete buildings and steel towers that housed the massive gates controlling water flow for the entire downstream region. Under normal circumstances, it would have been staffed by a small crew of technicians monitoring automated systems. But today, the parking area was filled with vehicles that clearly didn't belong to the water authority. 5 SUVs, 2 pickup trucks, and a mobile command unit, Elena counted. "How many people are we dealing with?" "Too many for a direct assault," Officer Zubair admitted, "but we have advantages they don't know about." He pulled out a detailed blueprint of the station that Dr. Hassan had included in his evidence files. The complex had multiple entry points, including maintenance tunnels that connected to the main control room. "Nova knows these tunnels," Officer Zubair explained. "Dr. Hassan used them for his surveillance work. If we can get inside without being detected, we can reset the gates and document whatever sabotage they've already completed." But as they studied the blueprints, Nova suddenly went rigid with attention. Her ears snapped forward and her body tensed as she focused on something only she could detect. Then Kai heard it too, the distinctive whine of a small aircraft engine, getting closer. "Drone," Officer Zubair said grimly, looking up at the stormy sky. "They're using aerial surveillance to watch for anyone approaching the station." Through the rain and low clouds, Kai could just make out the dark shape of a small drone circling the area around the flood control station. Its cameras would be able to spot their approach long before they could reach the maintenance tunnels. "We need a distraction," Elena said. Officer Zubair was already reaching for his radio. "Chen, this is Zubair. We need that arrest operation at the mining headquarters to happen now. Make enough noise to draw their attention away from the station." Detective Chen's voice crackled through the static. "Copy that. We're moving in now. Give us 10 minutes to create chaos." While they waited, Officer Zubair continued studying the station through binoculars. "I count at least 8 people moving around the complex. Most of them are positioned around the main control building, but there are guards at all the obvious entry points." Nova was studying the blueprint with the intense focus that Kai had learned to recognize. She pawed at a specific location on the map, a maintenance access tunnel that approached the station from the riverside, where the steep bank would provide natural cover from the drone surveillance. "Smart girl," Officer Zubair said. "That's the same route Dr. Hassan used for his final surveillance mission. Nova knows exactly how to get inside undetected." The sound of sirens in the distance indicated that Detective Chen's team had begun their assault on the mining company headquarters. The radio crackled with reports of arrests and evident seizures. "That's our cue," Officer Zubair said, starting the car. "Let's go save some lives." They drove as close to the river access point as possible, then continued on foot through the driving rain. The maintenance tunnel entrance was hidden behind a screen of overgrown vegetation, exactly as Dr. Hassan's notes had described. Nova led the way into the tunnel, moving confidently despite the darkness and her injured paw. The tunnel was narrow and lined with water pipes and electrical conduits, clearly designed for maintenance access rather than human comfort. "Stay close and stay quiet," Officer Zubair whispered. "We don't know if they have sensors in these tunnels." The tunnel seemed to stretch forever, sloping gradually upward toward the main station complex. Water dripped constantly from the overhead pipes, and the sound of their footsteps echoed softly off the concrete walls. But Nova moved with certainty, pausing occasionally to listen for sounds from above. Then, continuing forward when she was satisfied, the route was clear. Finally, they reached a junction where the maintenance tunnel intersected with the main facility. Nova stopped and looked back at them, her expression clearly asking, "Are you ready?" Officer Zubair checked his service weapon and his radio, then nodded. Elena adjusted her medical bag, which now contained all of Dr. Hassan's evidence files. Kai took a deep breath and scratched behind Nova's ears for luck. "Let's finish what Dr. Hassan started," Officer Zubair whispered. They emerged from the tunnel into a basement area filled with mechanical equipment. The sound of voices and footsteps from the floor above indicated that the station was indeed occupied by far more people than should have been there. Nova led them through the maze of machinery toward a stairwell that would take them to the main control room. But as they climbed the stairs, the voices above became clearer, and what they heard made Kai's blood run cold. "Floodgates are set for maximum downstream flow," a man's voice reported. "When the storm peaks in 4 hours, the entire Lower Creek area will be underwater within 20 minutes. "Perfect," came another voice that Kai recognized as Marcus Crane. "The mining operation will be completely covered by flood debris. No evidence, no investigation, no problems." "What about the people in those neighborhoods?" asked a third voice, sounding uncertain. Crane's response was chilling in its casual cruelty. "Accidents happen during severe weather events. Insurance will cover the property damage, and we'll be free to expand our operation into new areas once the investigation dies down." Officer Zubair's face hardened with anger. These people weren't just criminals. They were planning mass murder for profit. They reached the main level of the station and found themselves in a corridor that led to the central control room. Through a window in the door, they could see at least 6 men working at computer terminals and monitoring equipment. "Too many for a direct confrontation," Officer Zubair whispered. "We need to find another way." But Nova had a different idea. She moved to a secondary door that led to what looked like an observation deck overlooking the main gate mechanisms. From there, they could see the massive steel gates that controlled the river flow, currently positioned exactly wrong for the approaching storm. "Emergency override controls," Elena said, spotting a panel of switches and indicators on the observation deck. Dr. Hassan's notes mentioned that each gate section can be controlled independently from here. Officer Zubair studied the controls, cross-referencing them with Dr. Hassan's documentation. "If we can reset the gates to their proper storm configuration, we can prevent the flooding even if we can't stop all the criminals." But as he reached for the override switches, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Red lights flashed and automated voices announced, "Unauthorized access detected. Security protocols activated." "They know we're here," Elena said urgently. The sound of running footsteps in the corridors indicated that Crane's people were mobilizing to find the intruders. They had minutes, maybe less, before they would be discovered. Officer Zubair began rapidly adjusting the gate controls, working from Dr. Hassan's specifications to reset the system to safe positions. But the gates were massive, and even emergency adjustments took time to complete. 60% complete, he reported, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool air. "I need more time." That's when Nova made a decision that surprised everyone. Instead of staying with the group for protection, she limped toward the door leading back to the main corridor. "Nova, no!" Kai called softly. But Nova looked back at him with an expression of absolute determination. She was going to create the distraction they needed, even if it meant facing danger alone. She pushed through the door and limped deliberately into the main corridor, where her presence immediately triggered shouts from Crane's men. "The dog! She's here! Find the others!" Nova led them on a chase through the station complex, using her knowledge of the layout to stay just ahead of her pursuers while drawing them away from the observation deck. 80% complete, Officer Zubair reported, his hands flying over the controls. Through the observation windows, they could see the massive gates slowly grinding into new positions. Water flow patterns began to change as the river was redirected into proper storm channels. But Nova's distraction could only last so long. Soon, Crane's people would either catch her or realize that the real threat was in the control systems. 95%, Officer Zubair said. "Almost there." That's when Marcus Crane himself appeared in the observation deck doorway, flanked by 2 armed men. His polite mask had completely disappeared, replaced by cold fury. "Step away from those controls," he commanded. "You have no idea what you're interfering with." Officer Zubair continued working, not taking his hands off the gate controls. "I know exactly what I'm interfering with. Mass murder for profit." "Those people were going to lose their homes anyway," Crane said dismissively. "Development pressure, economic changes, climate shifts. The flood zones were doomed to be abandoned eventually. We're just accelerating an inevitable process." "While making millions of dollars and killing innocent families," Elena said angrily. Crane shrugged. "Business is business. Step away from the controls or I'll have you shot." But Kai had been listening to the conversation, with growing anger of his own. These men were talking about destroying his neighborhood, his school, his friends' homes, all for money. "You're wrong," he said, stepping forward despite the danger. "Those aren't just houses, they're homes. People's lives. My mom lives there. Crane looked down at the small boy who was defying him, and his expression shifted to something like amusement. A child. All this trouble because a child found a stray dog. Not a stray dog, Kai said firmly. Nova. Her name is Nova, and she's a hero, just like Dr. Hassan was a hero. At the mention of Dr. Hassan's name, Crane's amusement vanished. Dr. Hassan was a fool who didn't understand when to mind his own business. He understood that protecting people was more important than making money, Officer Zubair said, making the final adjustments to the gate controls. 100% complete. Floodgates reset to storm safety configuration. Through the windows, they could see the river flow patterns stabilizing into the proper channels for managing heavy rainfall. The immediate flood threat to residential areas had been eliminated, but their moment of triumph was interrupted by a commotion in the corridor outside. Nova had been cornered by Crane's men, and they were dragging her back toward the observation deck. "You're a heroic dog," Crane said with satisfaction. "Now we have leverage." Two of his men entered the deck, holding Nova between them, despite her struggles. Her injured paw was making it difficult for her to resist effectively. "Reset the gates to their original position," Crane commanded, "or the dog pays the price for your interference." Kai felt his heart break at the sight of Nova being held by the men who had hurt Dr. Hassan. But Nova looked at him with an expression that clearly communicated, "Don't give up. Complete the mission." "No," Kai said quietly. "What?" Crane demanded. "No," Kai repeated, louder this time. "Nova would rather die than let you hurt innocent people, and so would I." Officer Zubair and Elena moved to flank Kai, showing their support for his brave stance. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but they weren't backing down. That's when the sound of approaching helicopters filled the air outside the station. Through the windows, they could see police aircraft circling the complex. Crane's radio crackled with urgent reports. "Boss, we've got major law enforcement response, state police, federal agents, news helicopters. The whole operation is blown." Detective Chen's voice came through Officer Zubair's radio. "Zubair, this is Chen. We've got the mining company executives in custody, and their financial records are singing like canaries. Marcus Crane is officially wanted for murder, conspiracy, and about a dozen federal crimes." Crane's face went pale as he realized his entire operation was collapsing. The men holding Nova looked uncertain, unsure whether to continue following orders from someone who was clearly about to be arrested. "It's over, Crane," Officer Zubair said. "Let the dog go and surrender. You might get a better deal if you cooperate now." For a moment, it looked like Crane might accept defeat, but desperation made him dangerous. "If I'm going down," he snarled, "I'm taking all of you with me." He lunged toward the gate controls, trying to reset them to the dangerous configuration that would cause the flooding. But Nova broke free from her captors with a surge of strength and loyalty, placing herself between Crane and the control panel. What happened next would be remembered by everyone who witnessed it. Instead of attacking Crane, Nova did something that revealed the true measure of her character. She sat down in front of the controls and extended her injured paw toward Crane as if asking for help. The simple gesture of trust and vulnerability stopped Crane in his tracks. Here was the animal he had called dangerous, offering him the same kindness that Kai had shown when he'd found her trapped under the bridge. For a moment, something human flickered in Crane's eyes, something that remembered what it felt like to care about others instead of just profit and power. The moment stretched between them, a man who had chosen greed over humanity and a dog who had chosen to trust even in the face of danger. Crane reached down slowly, not to reset the controls, but to gently touch Nova's outstretched paw. "I'm sorry," he whispered, so quietly that only Nova could hear. That's when the station filled with police officers, federal agents, and emergency personnel. Crane surrendered without resistance. His men laid down their weapons, and Nova limped back to Kai's side, with her tail wagging weakly. The flood control system remained in its safe configuration as the storm reached its peak that evening. Instead of catastrophic flooding, the heavy rainfall was channeled safely through the proper drainage systems. Neighborhoods that would have been destroyed were barely touched by the high water. Dr. Hassan's evidence led to the arrest of dozens of corrupt officials and the complete shutdown of the illegal mining operation. The river system began to heal almost immediately, and new environmental protections were put in place to prevent future damage. Nova was officially recognized as a hero by the state government and received a medal for her service in protecting the community. But the recognition she treasured most was the simple love and loyalty she shared with Kai and Elena, who adopted her together and gave her the home she deserved. Kai returned to being a 5-year-old boy, but one who had learned that listening to what others needed was one of the most important skills anyone could develop. He continued to visit the creek, now flowing clean and safe, and he always remembered the lesson Nova had taught him about courage, loyalty, and the importance of doing what was right even when it was dangerous. The wooden bridge where their adventure had begun was rebuilt and renamed Nova's Crossing in honor of the brave dog who had protected an entire community. A small plaque told the story of how a boy's kindness to a trapped animal had led to the exposure of corruption and the saving of countless lives. But the real legacy of their adventure wasn't in monuments or recognition. It was in the knowledge that sometimes the most important thing you could do was simply listen to someone who needed help and have the courage to act on what you heard. The story of the boy who heard a German shepherd crying under a bridge and what happened next spread far beyond their small town. It touched millions of people around the world who shared it, discussed it, and remembered that heroism often starts with the simple decision to care about others. If this story touched your heart and made you believe in the power of kindness and courage, please subscribe, share it with others, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Together, we can spread more stories that remind us of the best parts of human nature and the incredible bonds we share with the animals who trust us with their lives.